Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live EMS session by Evolve. My name is Yash. I am the community experience designer at Evolve. For those who don't know about Evolve, Evolve is an ecosystem that we are trying to build to help out learn more about the role of design and how it can be helped out to create out a new and a better world. We also help out designers to find their niche. And along with that, we have a community so that you can have a shared experience, you can learn, collab, and grow together. So let's be real for a second. If you ever felt like design process is something which is a textbook thing and it's just happened similar to what we have in the real world, then you're like wrong. But you're not alone. The real design world is really messy and it's filled with really vague feedbacks. And I know stakeholders who just don't want like things to just pop up and a crazy deadline. So tonight we're just dropping out the textbook stuff and we'll be talking more about designing in the real world. And to help us navigate through this whole chaos, we have an incredible guest joining us today. So let me introduce Ankit Passi to all of you. Ankit is a senior product designer and design deputy manager at Deloitte Digital, bringing over like 7+ years of experience in the industry. What makes Ankit's journey stand out in his absolute love for experimentation. He's isn't just sticking around to the basics. He is actively integrating AI into his daily workflows. And he is also diving into 3D rendering with Blender and Unreal Engine. So building his career on the test and learn mindset. So he's seen how design operates at high corporate levels and is here to give us a massive reality check on how to survive and future proof our careers. So, firstly, Ankit, thank you very much for taking out some time to do this. We are super hyped up to have you here. Firstly, how are you doing tonight? And if you'd like to share a bit about your journey.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Actually, I attended a previous session where it was such a great experience. I like about to give back to the community. I'm going to tell about my experiences that I have. Hi everyone. First of all, thank you all of you for joining at this late hour. It was such a good feeling to see all of you together and wanted to learn more about the real design. That is not very textbook friendly. I don't know, I don't stick to the guidelines. My experience is like how Yash told me, my experience in design started not in a very definite way. I am a totally self-learned designer. I haven't had any boot camps and all of that certification per se. Every certification I got is after why I already know what I wanted to do with that. So I just got certification just for the sake of it. And I experimented a lot in like everything that I get my hands on and experiment on and create designs for everything. I did my bachelor's in computer science. So technically I'm an engineer who turned to design because I like to create sketches. I love to draw. I love to do everything that is related to art. And I thought like this is a very good career. At that time I didn't know if there's a career for UX design because I didn't know the field existed. But through experimentation, talking to people, seeing whatever that is available online, I got to know a lot about things. And now that journey is continuing for some time now. And even now, on the weekend itself, I love to experiment and create micro projects, things that are very small projects that try to solve one small problem of everyone that faces, especially me. Most of the problems are actually faced by me. So I create solutions for that. How he has told me, I know a lot of coding. I know backend design. I know front end. I did work as a release manager for one product, and I love to work on 3D, AR, VR. Whatever I can get my hand on. Very interested to know about your questions and see what are your concerns regarding the actual design that happens. So let's get started.
Thank you, Ankit. So before we start, for those who don't know, we have a community. You can scan the QR and join the community. We have more AMN sessions, we have webinars, we have challenges and activities going on. We also have a portfolio review program going on in which you can submit your portfolio and our mentors will get back to you in like 5 to 7 days with a personalized feedback on the whole portfolio. So, yep, you can scan the QR code and join the community and we'll get started. But before we get started, I just wanted to mention that we've chosen the most common questions which you guys face problems in, and we'll be addressing those questions. And for those people whose questions are not addressed today, don't worry, we'll be getting your answers and like from Ankit, and we'll be sharing it to you on your mails. So, yep, let's get started with the first question of the day. So, hello, I am a complete beginner and I feel confused about where to start. What does a proper roadmap for learning UX UI look like?
I think that is a question that everyone asks at every chance that they got. And it's a very valid question to have because the field itself is such convoluted field and with so many aspects to explore. Everyone gets confused where to go, how to get started with the road maps, and how to learn UX and UI. And and good thing is that you are a complete beginner because you don't have any specific expectations for it. You are just learning because I'm hoping you are interested in the field itself. But let me take a step back on that. I don't think like how we have learned everything till this point from our schools and our colleges. We always took a very structured approach. When you learn various modules and you will get the result at the end of it. But when you are working in a field or you want to learn about a field, like any creative field, I would say, especially with the UX field, there is no specific roadmap, I will say, for learning these parts because it totally depends on, what background that you're coming from and where do you want to go, right? Like even the term UX and UI is not a very friendly term because they are two different fields combined in one tag. UX and UI is a totally different domain with different set of goals and, how we approach things, right? So my thought around that, either we can have a very specific, module-based approach. I would say it's a learn module-based approach, or you can take an action-oriented approach. I took the action-oriented approach in my learning, where instead of learning everything from get-go and each and everything in a specific modules, I started with a big problem that I have that I want to create a product. That is the goal that I have in mind, and I want to create a product. I don't know anything about creating a product. I don't know how to get started with this, but I have this goal in the end that I can get started. I want to create a product, and from that start to take doing the breakdowns. Like what do you actually need to create a product? What type of product this is? Who will use this product? All of these small questions that you are asking when you are breaking down that specific goal. That is actually the UX process that you're getting into. The core of a UX designer, or I would say any designer, is to ask the question, why are we creating this part? Right? And when you start breaking down the problem in specific modules, like I need to solve a problem, that becomes the first question. What is the problem? Right? Now, there are multiple methods to explore those problems. Right? You can do research, you can talk to people, you can identify the problem that you're facing on your own. All of that is research. And now you identify that, that's the problem that people are facing. Now, how will you get to know that what type of people are facing these type of problems? Right? That's another question that you've asked me. Right? Now you are going into the persona making category. Right? That's how you identify your users. So, and when you break down these big goals into small chunks, now you get to one specific module where you are learning, and the learning from that will help you in creating the product. That is an action-based approach because you have a goal in mind, you have a problem to solve, and you're breaking that problem down and trying to learn around it. Now there are so many tools available in the market, right? Every day there's a new AI tool coming up, and even the very basic chat GPT without any subscription will help you in that. You just need to know what problem, what questions to ask. Right? Everything is there for you to get started. So you don't need a specific roadmap for it. You need to figure out actually what is the part that interests you most in this field. Because there are so many things that are interesting in the field, and you can be either jack of all trades like you know everything a little bit, or you can be specialized in one specific domain that you say that I like to research a lot and I will stay in the research part. But again, to do that, you need to explore, you need to experiment, and you need to start doing stuff instead of just learning, because we all love and to learn. And even I, when I did my basic certifications after I actually got enrolled as a UX designer, they told me so many methods for UX researching, like just for the quantitative research. And I read all of them, and my mind, I got all of them. But when I started for the actual project, it all panned out flat because I don't know which method to choose. Like, because there are so many methods. So you start with one point. You said that, okay, I like to do survey for this. I think survey is a good approach for this, and you get some result. Either it will be a good result or it will be a bad result. Either way, you got some result from it. You got some learning from it, and that's how you can start learning actual UX work, actual UI work. When you start creating something, instead of just learning. I think I don't know. There's no game issue for who asked this, but everyone who's starting on the field of UX UI or already working as a designer and still wants to learn more, my total suggestion for you is, start think products, start creating, start solving small problems, and start breaking them down in smaller chunks. Every question that you ask is another process that have its place in the UX process, and that's how you can learn a proper UX and a UI work. Maybe you can learn UX and maybe you can learn UI or maybe both. And that's how this term will come up, UX and UI. Right. But for that, you have to start not just learning, but to start creating something. Right. Your first project will be a total mess. I know we have all been there. It will be a mess if you give up a review. Even you won't like the first project, but that's okay. That's part of learning. Right. Then the second and the third, and by the fifth or the sixth project, you will get an understanding that, I know what things that I need to do, and maybe I need to expand a bit more on this. But this will how you will get to know about the most Linux projects and how you need to use those elements in a process. I
Yeah.
hope that answers the question.
Yes. Yes. It does. That's a really detailed answer. So, yep. Thank you.
Okay.
It's really good. Yep. Moving on to the second question. What kind of restrictions or constraints do you have to keep in mind when designing for different mediums or devices?
Okay. I think I'm hoping this is talking about type of different devices and what we need to keep in mind whenever designing for that. Again, when you are creating for the web, it's pretty straightforward. You have a lot of space to do experiments. You have an entire width of the screen, and you can experiment a lot on this. But that is where another concern comes up when you're designing for a large screen, such as 1280 and above, or 1440, 1920, is that ergonomics takes place when you're designing that, because you don't want your entire web page to be running from end to end. Right? If it is not a marketing website, then it does not make sense, because the user has to take constraint on that. They have to look from left to right the entire screen just to read your content. That does not make sense, because if you have a lot of content on that, it will be another problem for them. So you need to figure out, what type of project you're working on and what type of screen that they're working on. Right? But you can have a lot of small interactions and micro interactions on web. That is a very good advantage of working on web. Then comes the tablet and the mobile part. On the mobile, I think if I talk about mobile first, I guess already all of you know this, that you need to focus on specific elements that are needed for the user at that exact moment. You can't condense everything that is available on a web screen on a mobile part, because again, the real estate is not there. You have a very small screen, and you need to focus on the scroll based things. That is one thing that a lot of people actually miss when they are creating for mobile, that they forgot that scroll is a natural interaction on the mobile. Not so much on web, but a very natural interaction on a mobile device. So you need to take that into consideration when you're devising for mobile. But you can't use hover states. You can't use touch and tap elements, because again, they are not there. So you need to make some choices that the thing that you create on web might not be able to replicate exactly on the mobile. And then comes a tablet. Tablet is the most tricky part in these both scenarios, because on the tablet, if you put it on a portrait mode, then you need to make a choice that, are you rendering web page exactly it is designed on a web, or you will be using the mobile front on it. Because on the portrait mode on the tablet, you have much more similar to the mobile, but not very less density, not so much density than a mobile, right? But if you flip your tablet in the landscape mode, then it becomes just like your laptop screen. So you need to make another choice that, if should I render the mobile version on it or the web version on it, or I need to make another breakpoint where I can just work on specifically on the tablet part, right? But again, the same interactions for the mobile will be coming up on the tablet because again, it's a touch-based tablet, but now you can attach laptop keyboard and with it, so it can become a laptop. So there's so many considerations, but the thing is that, you need to focus on what type of content you want to showcase on that specific device. Like tablet, I talked about mobile. If we go a level more below on that, now you have smartwatches, you have wearables, right? On that part, you have a very small space to design everything. So you need to focus on the very important aspects that are available for your product. If you're like, I'm sure most of you have the smartwatches with you. Every app that you install will showcase to talk about a step counting app. It only shows the step that you're counting at that moment, right? It is not showing those steps every time. So you need to make that choice. What type of information I should present to my user at that exact moment at that point in time. Because I have very less screen space. Right. Now, if I expand that in a more broader sense, like if you're designing for 3D, right, you're working with AR, work with VR, spatial design, then the entire script changes because now you don't have any space constraint with you, but you do have ergonomics issues with you because now the user is wearing a headset to view the UI, right? Now you need to take care of the surroundings of the user so that user does not get bumped up in the wall just by interacting with your website or with your product, right? And on the AR, VR, and spatial, you don't have normal touch. You have touch and hold, touch and pinch type of interactions. So whenever you are designing for any specific medium, you just need to make sure what type of medium that you are choosing for your products. Not all mediums might cater for your product, and what type of interactions that are available for that specific medium, and how you can leverage those interactions and available real estate for presenting your printer in the best way possible. Again, just design something and test the user. You'll automatically get to know, if it is usable or not. I hope that answers.
Yeah, thank you. Yep. Moving on to the third question. It's a lot of pressure when stakeholders expect designs in 2 days, but give developers months to build, claiming that only the development part holds value. How do you handle this pushback? Preeti has asked
Okay.
that question.
Thanks, question, Preeti. I'm sure every one of us has gone through it or right now going through it in one way or another. And that's a very valid and a realistic question, I would say, because this thing happens a lot because, you know, whenever a stakeholder interacts or, things in the terms of financials for any product, they have specific metrics in mind, right? That, they have certain criteria to fulfill from the business side that they want to contain if they want the business to be viable or the product to be successful, right? Development, specifically development, has those parts cut down from them, right? You go into the front end development, you go into the back end development. These are the resources that you will be needing to do those part of things. And then you have QA testing with it. And all of that part is there, right? So it's very quantifiable for developers that you need two developers to deliver this feature, this certain timeline, right? Because they are working the code part, and code is a very quantifiable metric that whenever you put something, the feature will come up, and that is to be set, it is to done. Right? But from a design perspective, design is a very much liberating or a creative field where you don't have any constraints per se. And that is where it gets tricky because it becomes very hard to quantify the design part. Because you might be iterating two or three screen layout for one single homepage because again, your mind is going into different directions and you want to experiment a lot of stuff. As you should, because that is the core point of view is that you experiment a lot on things and try to settle on things that actually works. Right. But you need to make those iterations and the variations that have shown to the stakeholder that this is also very quantifiable work. Tell them in the sense that is directly tied to the outcome that you're creating. Whatever you are creating and you are finalizing will be going to development. So if you do a bad job in creating a design that is not handling the actual use case and not doing the work it should, whatever thing that you've created will go to development and it will suck actually, and people will not able to use. But you need to tell that in not in a more business metric way, right? That is one part that is very important for designers to learn, that you need to talk to people in their own terms, right? Not that you justify everything that you do as a designer in terms of design, right? Right. They don't understand that, and right, that's not their work, right? But you need to talk about them, that if you don't, you can talk about in such way that, if I have a chance to do a bit more user testing for this specific workflow, then I will have the guarantee that this will go bad. And whenever it can get developed, the user will be able to use it in this specific sense. That's a really straightforward conversion for them. That if the workflow is already iterated or verified and vetted at the design level, then we don't need external validation after the development has done. That's a time saving for them. That's a money saving for them, and very fast to go into the release side. So identify whatever that you present on the stakeholder meetings in terms of the business metrics that you have. That this feature, if I do one more iteration, this will help in iteration, this will help in less turnaround time from developer to QA to design and product and such as. So it will automatically will save some time. If you talk in those terms, that will be understandable for them, and it will help you put your case in a better metrics. If you have metrics with you, if you can quantify the results that you are generating by any means that any means necessary, they don't have to be very specific metrics. If you can just give them a rough ball idea, because people works better when there is a very quantifiable thing that is available for them, right? Right. So if you present any tech, just you can say that, I did this research, and, if I do one more iteration with this, and, I create this specific feature in this part, I can say that, around 30 to 40% conversion is guaranteed on this part. That's a quantifiable metric for them, right? They can use this metric in the further conversation that they have at the future level, at the, management level. My suggestion is talk to people in their own terms. First, identify, what terms that they understand. Everyone has their different agendas to cover. Try to talk to them in that way. And if you can use data whenever it is possible, because that will help to build your case a lot better than just saying that, I just need one more day to finish this design. If you can tell that, I can give you one variation of this layout of the core workflow in one day, because I know this metric, because this workflow is a core metric of this project, and it will result in 40% conversion. I'm just balling it. So that gives a lot of quantifiable metric for them, and it will help you translate those insights into better work for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope it answers your question. I think from the class, I think it does.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next question. Yeah. Does the pressure of meeting tight deadlines ever get easier? Does it follow you for a lifetime?
Very real question. I will give you a very blunt answer for this actually. No, it never gets easier, right? And it will follow you like your design lifetime whenever you are working in the design. And even if you move into the exec level or any management level, this still will haunt you, because deadlines are always there. Everyone in such hurry that, this will follow you in that time. But the thing is, as you progress forward in the career, right? I am hoping that you have started the career itself, and, you just got to get very tight deadlines with you, and, all that. But that is, and it's very scary whenever you first got your first deadline that, you need to convert and, create these things in this specific time. But as you progress forward, now, you start learning the ins and out of the deadline itself, right? Because now in the second iteration of the project that you're doing, or the third iteration, you are not starting from scratch. Right? You have the insights with you from the previous iteration. That is a very beneficial thing about iteration, is that the insights that you got from the previous iteration, either it is bad or it is good, or it helped you learn something, they will carry forward with you. And now you know what things you actually don't need to do to get a better result, and what things that you need to focus on whenever you are working on a tight deadline, right? Because when you're starting on the first time, you have everything on the open, you don't have any direction, you don't know where to go. And that is where it gets scarier because so many things to do very less time. But as you progress forward into the work, into the multiple iterations, then you get to know that, in the previous iteration, I did this analysis and I don't think heat map will work here, but I think a heuristic evaluation might work better in that. So that's a time saving for you. Like you're working now instead of doing two tasks at once, you're doing only one because you're that that thing is not working for this exact project. And then this keeps on building whenever you are working in different concepts, different deadlines and different times and different teams. Because your experience, that is the one thing that a designer or not design, even designer, like everyone has who has worked in a very high stakes environment, that the experience that they get from that entire thing, right? You know what works, you know what not works, you know what to skip and you know what to use, what tool for that. Now you have AI tools with you. Maybe you can offer some tasks to it. And you now you have the insight that what insights I actually need to make this work. You have a shorthand with the developers because you used to lot with them a lot on the first iteration. So now you already have a conversation with the developers and the product people. And all of that experience will help you in saving deadlines, in saving time, and doing the work that you're doing right now in a much more better way. So that maybe in the first iteration, your third variation worked, but in the fifth iteration of the project, your first design is picked up indirectly, right? Why? Because your experience, you use your experiences, and you use your tools that you have at your disposal to make that specific design, right? So that is that's why I said that deadline never gets easier, but you learn to get work around it. You know what to work through it, and you know what to pick from that part, and use that in the different camps.
Makes sense. Yeah. Thank you. We'll move on to the next question. Okay. A long one, but yeah.
Okay.
I've been a solo designer at a startup for a year. Due to budget and time constraints, we completely skipped user research and testing. Our products were built but ultimately failed and never reached real users. Because of
Okay.
this, I have no research or impact metrics to back up my designs. How can I showcase this work in my portfolio?
Right.
Honestly, am I even a real UX designer at this point? Keshav, I
Okay.
got this question.
Very heavy pointers at the end of this question. But thank you all for asking this question, Keshav. Let me just clear the one thing first with you. Yes, the work that you are doing is a UX designer's work. You are a UX designer. If you're working for us as a solo designer in a startup for a year, you are doing the UX designer's work. Don't let that thought be go any further than this. You are working as a UX designer and you're doing product, you're doing your work, whatever in the time constraints that you have. But okay, you don't have this year user and you don't have any research and impact to that right? See, one thing that I saw in a lot of young designers and even in the experienced designers case studies that they are too polished, right? They all talk about very happy flows and everything that goes very happily into the project, right? That is never the case in the real world. Every project you do a lot of compromises, you do a lot of shortcuts, and you do a lot of things that does not make sense, but you do it because you want to get the product line, right? Even if you don't have any, metrics to showcase and, don't have a research, put that in the case study, right? People and actually the people who are hiring actually UX designers who are working with the field. That is a very good difference in between a designer who wants to be hired and designer who is just working and they don't have any time to compile the case study. Put everything as it is what you have in the case. As vague as it sounds, the missing things that you have in the case study are more real than the people who have used AI and ChatGPT and Gemini to polish their case study because that shows that you have done the work in whatever capacity that you have done. But again, because the work is ever changing, the requirements are almost like ever always changing and feedback getting very big at every point of time. You don't have everything in a very hunky dory, right? You have very real things to have on the case study. If you have the time, upon like when you're done with the project, I'm hoping that you're done with the project and you just want to write a case study for it. If you have the time, try to do basic analysis and basic metric gathering on your own time, right? Because A case study is a place where you can showcase the work that you have actually done when you have a lot of constraints and things that you can do if there are no constraints available. Right. It shows that you are working in a company and working with the people, and people have different agendas at any point of time. You somehow were able to make your product live in any way that you have done. But when I got a chance to do the work on my own terms, and if I don't have any restrictions to show for it, I can do this part. That adds on to your case study, because I think, I took a lot of interviews and I gave a lot of interviews. One of the questions that keeps on repeating on every case study review is that, if given the choice, what are the things that you can do differently? That shows, and that question is specifically to gauge your own skill set, that you are doing everything that the product manager is telling you, or are you using your own skill set for this. So if you can gather some metrics, do that, or try to create this project in the way that you feel is the best way of your representation of the work, but also put the work that you have done in the company and tell that directly, that I have this constraint on the team. And if that a good recruiter, a good design recruiter always understand this part, that if you're working as a solo designer at a startups are very high paced. Like, they are very high paced. They are working on a make or break action always, and must have done some compromises into that workflow. They just want to know what compromise did you make, right? You just want to know that. So you tell them directly, like, this is a compromise that I made, but if they given the choice, I can do this. That will bring your case study at a much more higher level, where it is a very real life case study with the things that you have done and things that you can do. Okay? And for the last pointer that you have written, yes, you are a UX designer and you are doing a very good work in such capacity. Right? So keep on working through it.
Thank you for the amazing answer. Moving on to the next question.
Okay.
Yep. So, for someone with 1.5 years of experience, when is
Okay.
the right time to transition into a product based company?
Okay. See, there is no specific deadline or a timeline whenever you want to switch to a product-based company, but there is a very stark difference, because I worked in both type of companies, and I saw a very stark difference between how you work in a product-based company and how you work in a service-based company. The pros of a service-based company is that you get to experience a lot different type of domains in one go. Every 2 months or 3 months after a project is completed, you get to have another project in some different domain. You are working in a healthcare domain in this project, but you will get warehouse project in the next domain, right? It's very good for people who come into the industry, because at this point of time, you don't know what type of domain and what type of work that you actually want to work. You need to have that type of exposure, that, I have worked in this domain, and I clicked a bit more on this specific domain, right? And you will get that when you're working through it, and working through a lot of it, and have experienced a lot of it, and that becomes a metric for you that you can take in consideration when you're switching for a product-based company. In a product-based company, you're working in a one specific domain of that product-based company. If it is Google, then that's the whole different story. Then you are everywhere. Google, I wouldn't say Google is a product-based company. No, it's a service-based company, right? But when you're working with a product-based company, you have a specific domain and a specific type of project, and you take the ownership of that entire project. If it works, product managers will take all the credits, and you will get a bit more credit for that. But if it fails, then it's your ass on the line, because you are the one with the design. So the entire credit relies on you, right? And whatever the next edition of that product will come up, it will begin on whatever that you have already developed, right? It will not work from the scratch, right? That is the very good benefit, I think I would say, of the product-based company, that you learn to take the ownership of the product, right? But still, you will be stuck in one specific domain, right? That is where the experience with the service-based company comes into place. That you worked a lot on different type of project, and you have experienced a lot type of different domains. You have conversed with a different type of people. You have, how to present your findings to the diverse group that the team has. And now what type of domains that I love to work, and what type of domain that you do like. So if you are confident, my answer for this question is that If you're confident that, you have selected that, I think my work will go better if I work in that specific domain, then by all means, find a product-based company and, apply for it. Right. If you still want to, I don't have the clarity that, I don't know, what type of domain should I go for, then, stay a bit more, explore a bit more different type of projects and, try to find that edge that, that will help you in making that type of decision. And again, if you make a wrong decision and you join a domain that is not your forte, that's okay. Right. Good thing about changing job is that you can do it more than once. So, just like design, everything is I. So, keep on doing like however you got insights, you will get through it.
Yeah, thank you. Moving on to the seventh question. How do I transition from being an indispensable specialist to a leadership role, especially when my current lead is hindering my growth?
I think someone's trying to vent out, but that's fine. We all been there. See, that is a pro and con of being a good designer in a team because you are specialized in one specific way. You know the ins and outs of the product. Everyone can rely on you when it is needed. But that is also make it very dangerous for your manager to promote you because if you will go in the management in a above ladder, then who will be there to cover the your work, right? Because you as a person are more worth keeping at that exact level and to promote you higher. That is what manager thinks in that specific way. And it's not wrong to want to go into the leadership role. That is your right because you know how. So at when you're doing this part, one thing that you can do is you stop being apologetic for it, right? Yeah, you try to lead on your own accord, right? You don't have to run everything by your manager, right? If people know that they can rely on you on this specific task and you know the work of that specific project or the domain in general, right? Try to go through them, start leading without the title, I would say, whatever the title that you want to have, start doing the work for it without anyone asking. Try mentoring your juniors, try to reach out to product managers and analysts on your own accords that, so that that connection is built between you and the higher management level and you will be visible in the grid that this is the person and like if the manager is not available on the call, you are there and people are okay with that, that this person is there on the call. I can rely on this because I have worked with him. He can do the work in a better way. So let's do that. So that will bring out your visibility to the team that I'm doing the work of the product manager, but not being at the manager level. So that is very good part. Second part is that do start working on the projects that put you in higher visibility. Every big project that comes directly from the ladder, right, from the higher management, try to get involved in, try to get yourself involved in that project. Why? It will be an extra work for you, for sure, but it is a very straightforward and easiest way to get your name out there. So that, whenever, because one thing that I saw in a lot of big companies that, people, if you've done a good work with them, but they know you by your name. That, why can't, that they can decide to say, why can't we involve that specific guy in your team, even when your manager is present in the room, right? So that is your visibility that you have built, the brand that you have built across the profile. And the last, I think the most option is there that, if not everything, this is not working out, that, you have done everything that you can, but still not getting promoted, switch the company. Right. There might be a company that is more suited for your needs, who will appreciate your talents a bit more, and who will see that your talents are not wasted in that specific sense. That will help you in a much better way. And when you get an offer down, you will automatically see a change in the current management automatically. So, try to do whatever that you can, put your name out there, and even after that nothing is working out, just switch it. No, you're not, it's not your company. So, you cancel it. So, why not?
True, true, true. Thank you. Yep. Moving on to the eighth question.
Oh, AI question. Yes.
Yes. So, with AI making design faster and easier, what human skills will matter most in the next few years? And how can a beginner stand out in the market where many of us use the same AI tools? And
Okay.
lastly, if you were starting your career today, what would you focus on first to become future ready?
Okay, nice. I'll answer the first two questions together, and then I'll go for the third one. See, again, I think that's a misconception that is going a lot on LinkedIn, and that AI tools are there to replace you. They are not. Right. They are just like every other project that comes into place. They are there to fasten the work that you've already, that tedious work that you are doing for so many years. They're just there to fasten that process. The skills that you can gather, it's not the tool that matters, right? You can do the same iteration in every type of different tools. Some tool might do it more faster and in a better way, but that is totally up to you. How did you prompt it and how what insight that you have that will help in making that product in a much better way. Right. That is where the skill comes in, that your taste is your own. Your design perception is your own. Right. No AI tools can replicate that. What type of insights that you are getting from the research that you have done is the research that AI tools can't do it now, but they might be able to help you in that in a more later sense. But all of these things will help you stand out from the other crowd, right? These are the skills that no AI tools can replicate, or not even another designer can replicate. Like your judgment of how do you tell your stories, what type of metrics that you use to convey the story that you have created, what type of visual style that you have, what type of experimentation that you like to do when you're getting the content. AI will help you in fasten that entire process. So now you don't have to sit the entire day just to create three different variations and three different visual styles. What style that you have in mind. You can ask AI tools to create those variations, and then you will introduce your own style onto that. No AI tool can replicate that, right? And when everyone is using the same AI tool, right? And that is where your skills come up into place, what type of problem that you are actually solving and how you are solving them. What type of insights you are getting out to solve that exact problem, right? Even if you open awards, I think there's a website called awards.com, you can see it. It's a very good place to see what type of experimentation people are actually doing onto web pages, right? Those are very handcrafted websites. When you can't say that they are AI generated website, because if you can see an AI generated website, they look exactly in some way. But those websites are such a visual feast for you to have and explore and create your own taste. So you can use AI tools to faster your process, but the taste, the style, the design, the judgment, the storytelling, and how you're solving the UX of will be your own metrics. And that is how you stand out from the rest of the crowd on what type of, because no one is interested in seeing the final output. They are more interested in seeing, how you got to that final output. So, you can start there as a starting point. I hope that answers. I think I'll go for the, if you're starting, right. Future ready, right? See, when I started my career, I used to work on Adobe XD, right? That was a premium tool that was available at that time, right? And I used to do a lot of experimentation on that tool. And then suddenly Figma dropped in, right? Out of the blue, right? So I was future ready at that point, but then I was not, right? Then I got to learn about and everything. Now AI tools are there in place, and so if I am starting my career today, I will still do the same exact thing. I will focus on my experiments. Now I will use those AI tools to create those outputs in a much faster way. Like if I give you an example, I created one AR application and it took me 3 months to get that prototype ready. Right? Maybe with the AI tools, I can get that much faster and in a much better way, right? In a much less time frame. So I'll still focus on the experimentation and learning how to. One thing that I can focus on if I start to look at it, how to talk to people of different diverse criteria and backgrounds. Like that's very important. I got to know that in a very mid stage of my career that you need to talk to the people in their own terms. Like I asked, like I told in the previous question that you need to talk to the people in their own terms. That is something that I can start focusing on the first part. Second is that I will use and consume more visual experiments that are available on the web to create one specific type of taste as a designer, right? Like right now, I love brutalism, but now I got to know that, there's something called new brutalism, skeuomorphism. There are so many things that are. So if you consume all of that, then you get to know, what is the taste that you're bringing towards, what is your visual identity through that. So maybe I'll focus on that. Talking to the people of business mindset, focus a lot more on the experiment, but in a shorter time frame. And creating more of my own visual style and my own visual identity for it.
Great, great, great. Thank you. We'll move on to the last question. After that, we'll have the live AI.
Okay.
Okay. So, what does the real everyday integration of AI look like in a design workflow beyond the
Great.
superficial LinkedIn post?
Yeah, every time I open LinkedIn, there are 10 people posting the same content in some different way and, using a different type of AI tools in supposedly their own workflows. But very small minutia part is used in the real AI part. I use right now I'm working with Deloitte and, it's a big organization and we are not because we are working on a very specific client-based material, so we can't expose our those data to the open model LLMs. So, but still, I use to work fast my work using AI. In the documentation, I'll help. I use Figma AI tools a lot to name my layers, and because when you're working in a messy way, that small feature helps a lot because to name that. And since I already work on a lot on the 8 auto layout feature, that helps me structure my content in a more better way, and I use it to write my copies but in a much more real sense. It's not like that AI write all my copies. That I write the first draft always. And I try to cater to the specific tone of the copies through AI. Like if it is making sense or not. Again, after generating the copy, I'll verify that text that if it is making sense with this type of project or not. And upon that decision, I take the call that let's will go. So in the research, from the research perspective, I use Gemini deep thinking a lot because it will help you in doing the comparative analysis in a much faster way. Because again, like I told you guys, deadline is always there, right? And you need to fasten your work whenever you can. So I do a lot of comparative analysis and a basic heuristic evaluation using these AI tools because it will give me a bit more heads up towards the real design so that I know what metrics to focus on when I do the actual. So they give me a very good starting point and then I use that insights to do a much more deep analysis of my designs. So that is a real everyday integration of with AI that I do. I use it for my copies. I do it for my basic research analysis. That is the starting part of my analysis, and try to vet my design directly through it, and see if it is thing in that specific way or not. If not, I do multiple variations and see if any one of them is making sense or not. So, that makes sense. So, and again, the one more thing that I train my AI bots in such a way that, it helps me. It works as a, sparring buddy with it. Whenever I have any questions and any concern, I ask them that, what does it make sense? Does this make sense? Just for a normal conversation that I have, just to keep my thoughts clear and see that, if it is making sense or not. So you can use the AI tools in that specific way as well. And it's just for a normal conversation and see if they are making sense or not.
Thank you, thank you. That's really deep. Okay, moving on to the live AMA. So, guys, the floor is open for you guys to ask questions. You can unmute yourself and either drop the questions in the chat. Take like 2 to 3 questions since like we're already reaching the time limit. But yep, so
What
there's
is
some
your
questions.
yeah, you can.
Yeah, there's some questions in the chat. We'll just take those up, and if anyone else has any question, they can like unmute themselves and
Sure.
ask. Yeah. Okay. So first question is asked by Sam. As you mentioned, you know front end, back end too. So curious about this. Small context. I designed for B2C apps. What languages and how much would you suggest to learn for apps? I only hear for the websites and to just learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and want to know for the apps to understand what's easier to build, opportunity cost of it, etc. How do you use this knowledge and otherwise knowledge to assist and build AI workflows or agents and or use vibe coding tools to assist in your workflow?
Okay. It's a big question, I would say. but like for the gist of it, yeah. So see, when I started the design, not even the design, when I started in my career itself, I had to learn all of that because, I did not know that there's a field called UX. So I thought the front end is the way to go. And that's how we got to know about UX. And from that, I learned that because I used to participate in a lot in hackathons and, all of that competitions. And because you are always on a deadline, even in the hackathons itself. So you need to know it's a small team and you're trying to beat the product and within with the can. And that's why I got to know all of these tools, how to write APIs and, use that code in the postman to see the response and, use that in building the backend and the front end. And I would say that now don't actually involve in the code as of now because, the work has moved a lot in that particular direction. I use a vibecoding tool a lot to create my own micro projects for that. And I currently I'm using Version View and now started to use Copilot as well in the workflow with that. For if you're like, what lab, how would you suggest? So, see, again, that is the where action-oriented approach might come into the place that, when you know that you want to create an application or you want to create an app, either it could be an Android or iOS or both or something like that. I used to do that. I want to create a product and I start breaking down through that. And I only try to learn such that I can achieve that specific goal. Like not all of it, because it's a very big domain in its own, just so that I can create the specific part that I'm having some struggle in. That's how I got to know Xamarin. There was there was a diagnosis from Microsoft way before called Xamarin. We used to create both Android and iOS app in one code base. So that was where I got to know about all of that part. Right. But it also helped you then having the conversation with developers, which is very important for a designer because when you're conversing with a developer, you want to create whatever that is actually implementable in the code itself. And then you can talk to them on their own terms that, I know these type of workflows are available and can be created. So, you can do that. That is how you know that, these technologies necessary for you. That's how I use this type of technical knowledge that I have just to have a conversation with developers. And if they say that this is not possible, I make it my own mission to, try to create a specific feature in any tool that I have specifically, and then try to prove them wrong and say, it is possible, you're just not doing it. So, that's how you can have the conversation. So my thought is that, you can start building the application and start bringing down that in a smaller chunks and automatically you get to know, what you need to know and what you actually have to know to build that application. If you go by module, then it will take a lot of time just to get the basics ongoing. So I'll say start from the top and go in a much more fun way.
I hope this answer your question, Sam. Okay, we'll take the next question by Neeraj Sharma. Sometimes when we do research, we begin with one problem, but the insights lead us to a completely different problem. That's where confusion happens, whether to stick to the initial problem or pivot based on the new finding.
Right. See, Neeraj, it's a good question. See, that is why you do the research, right? Just to validate the insight, the problem statement that you have created or the team that has created on the mind is valid or not. Right? That is where the core of the research comes into place. That the thing. See, if you stick with the problem statement that you have as of now, but the research is not supporting it, and there is no business upside of that problem as well, right? And then you will be creating a dead product that you will have that product, but no one will be using, right? So you need to find, but you can't say that I need to pivot into a totally different thing because my research says that because if you do another research pass, then maybe that research will change. So that is where the collaboration with product managers, the business, the stakeholders, everyone takes place. That how much pivot that you actually want to do. Right? Do you want to change the entire problem statement, or do you want to reserve some aspects of the original problem statement and try to build certain features from the revised problem statement? Right. So that is a conversation that you need to build because again, make the entire decision solely on the user research because you need business to support that problem as well. Right. So you need both parts. I won't say that you have to go either or. Just try to find a middle way. Try to find what type of percentage that we can pivot, and if it is makes sense or not. That is where the MVP also comes into place. You start to create the one and see if it is resonating with people or not.
Okay, let me guess. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Even another question. Doesn't user testing indeed reduce risk, but still cannot give a guarantee though? As that is why in app testing and in app A/B testing is also done. If the user testing acquired the guarantee, then why do we do and what do we do in app user testing and A/B testing first?
Correct. Yeah. So I think, Sam, you have answered the question itself. Again, yeah, that is one thing that you all have to understand that no type of research is ever complete, right? If that was the case, then, the entire development team should have shut down already. Right? No one would be hiring because any problem that you can think of right now is already solved in one way or another. Right. So there's no need to, hire any more designers, hire any more developers or anyone of that sort. No type of research or no type of testing is 100% foolproof, but it gives you a very good area and a general direction of where your product is heading. Right. Suppose you have done a lot of in user testing and you hit a specific demographic and that product is doing a very good in that specific user testing. But when you live it to the market and live to the public, that is where the real insights start to flow. You know, then you use those insights to see that if it is working in the data that I got from your testing or not. That is again why we do in-app testing and A/B testing as well. If I give a very general example, you all must have seen iSpan, right? The web page that they have created. Yes, you can see you can all read that because it goes in a very different direction on a webinar. But Apple has to create two different type of web pages, one for where in the country and one specifically for the Korea region for for totally different reasons, right? They could have just, the web page could have worked better and could have worked in all countries based on their testing, but they still roll out because when they released a very specific website, it got some negative feedback from the Korean community, right? For some other reasons that you can all read about it. And then they went ahead and did some experimentation on it and change the entire web page for that specific content. So again, they have Apple has no problem for the resources. They can do a lot of testing that they can, but they still to the market live and then had to make some changes. So again, nothing can beat real markets insights. So user testing is not the only method to get the insights. Real market insights are actually much more valuable and important for any product.
Yeah. Okay, and last, like, we'll take two more questions.
Mhm.
When beginner UX UI designers are making hypothetical projects, how can we get hired without showing metrics? This has been bothering
Right.
me.
See, it's a very real problem because again, when you're working on a hypothetical problem that has no business standpoints or any metrics to show, then again, first thing that you need to make it absolutely clear when you're presenting that specific case study is that this is a personal project that I have done. Right? It's not there's no validated case study because if you don't say that it's done, it means there's expectation in the mind of big book is that it's a real case study and there might be some business associated metrics awarded to that specific project. But they are not the only metrics you're creating project, right? So a lot of UX specific metrics are there. You know, the first 5 second rule, the first 5 second metric is there, time to value is there, and a lot of different these small metrics are there that specifically talks about how well your design is catering to those UX specific metrics. Then, so your case study will have that point missing that I don't have. It doesn't have that specific business case scenario with it. But if you can substantiate your case study with UX specific metrics, time to first value, first 5 seconds, CTA clarity, some heat maps, how the case is working, some basic heuristic evaluation from an expert opinion, accessibility checks, right? Keyboard testing that you have done. So you already have 6, 7 metrics. They are data specific, not designed. It shows the recruiter that, because you don't have the luxury of having the business insights, but you did expanded on the user experience level, right? And that is what the recruiter wants to see. They don't want to see your finished product. They want to see how you approach the product and what insight that you actually get when you have the customer. So you can use those UX metrics and tell them, these are the UX metrics that I have. It's better to be clear at the front than, try to, wrap it up in later session, later talks of the case study.
Yeah, makes sense. Yes.
Yes or no?
If I may add to this, one other thing that you could do is when you're doing the testing part, sorry, research part, you already have the problem statement and you've created something. You could do a user testing also, like post that. You could actually go out and test it out and then show that result that, I created this prototype, I went out, showed it to other users, and this is their response. So even that can become like a metrics that will
Sure.
just show that, you could also test it out and then you have results. So that is
Right.
also what you could do. Just wanted to add that.
Every insight that you have is a good insight.
Hi, I'm Krishnin. So I have been working in a startup for almost 1 year now,
Right.
and you had mentioned that in a large corporation like Deloitte, you don't get to use AI in your daily workflow because of data confidentiality. But
Right.
for startups, isn't it changing like the role of developers as well as designers? Because in our company itself, right now, I haven't touched. I am a sole designer, and it's a startup company. I haven't touched Figma for almost a month now because the workflow right now is that I create in Figma Make and then
Right.
use GitHub Copilot and use the
Mhm.
screenshot I created in Figma and then
Sure.
develop it for the developers. So the role of developers now is that the design they will edit or fix the bugs. So
Okay.
again, I am also having an imposter syndrome because now sometimes the Figma Make is making better decisions than what I would have thought.
Sure.
So isn't the role changing to doing the like comparison between the designs it provides and then
Right,
making
right. Yeah. See, workflow is never static, right? And workflows keep on evolving and, doing sometimes it does a better job than your workflow. And it will keep on changing. Like, I won't say that, I hope it does, and I hope it does a lot. And so that we all get to learn a lot more things, right? But that is where, keeping up to the data and, because now you have a tool with you that is helping you in making decisions with you, that opens up your bandwidth to experiment a bit more, right? Try to learn from other solutions that are already created in some better way, right? So now instead of like that was the problem with earlier designers as well, that we don't have a lot of time to experiment a lot because again deadlines are there and whatever variation that we're creating we have to create on our own and then have to explain that when you have offloaded that creation part to a specific tool, that opens up your bandwidth to explore a bit more, create a more verbose workflows for that, and specifically focus on the UX part of it, not just the UI, but for the UX part of it. Right. The navigation pattern that the Figma or any the design tool is creating, that will go through you. Right. You will take a call that, if it is making sense for me or not. And how will you make a call that, it will make sense for you or not? Because by testing it for people, right? Because you're not creating the product for you yourself, you're creating for the people, right? So that is one thing where your need is required, but because developers can't take the call that if it is a norm, it is a good interaction pattern or not. Right? Sometimes you want to experiment on it, because startups have the luxury of experimenting a lot on a different interaction pattern. But if you ask Figma Make to create a unseen interaction pattern, it won't be able to create, right? Because it can't create original work.
Yeah.
It can take a reference from a lot of already created work. That is how all LLMs work, actually, right? So someone has to create those real work, right? And that is where your bandwidth will take place. Your style will take place. That try to create something new, and then explain that to Figma Make, and then try to create it in Figma Make. Then, then you're justifying your role as well as Figma Make's role in the workflow. Right? Our developers can't say no to you because you already created that in Figma Make, and they just need to port it to their own code base. So
Yes.
much more less hectic function for between you and the developer. You know, so that's how you can use your own bandwidth in that part.
Yeah.
Just
Thank
by
you.
exploring the creativity.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah. So we have an AD. Last question. Would you call it an enterprise design? How is it different? I guess he's mentioning the product-based companies question. Aniri, if you'd like
Yeah.
to add on more.
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
I was asking this in context when you mentioned about Google not being either product or service based company. So I have been hearing this enterprise design term a lot, especially from from my seniors from corporate. So I heard this term at a senior, like from a senior at IBM. I'm not sure if this is coming upward or how is it different from service based or product based design. So would you like to elaborate on it?
So enterprise design is, from my own experience, enterprise design is not specific type of how we talk about in a product design terms, right? Enterprise design caters towards the service design as well as the things that are not part of your actual visual and the UX workflows, right? Enterprise design is totally up to the work that are built by, because inside the company there are so many design teams. They are not working. Those design teams are not working on UX design or a UI design. Like L&D, if you talk about the L&D work, L&D needs to create courses, they need to create all of that. That is also a designer's job. A designer is hired specifically to create L&D type of content, right? That is a part of enterprise design. So I would say that enterprise design caters to a specific product-based or service-based company, but it's a whole another level of design built on top of MNCs and the big corporations that take care of that specific type of design. And it's not the by of the design board.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Thank you.